Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Um, Follow-up questions, something that you feel wasn't covered, or something that you want to know about regarding to the topic of community leadership, following that leadership. What is your stance? What is your role? What have we done well? What should we do better? What have we done wrong? What needs to be fixed? And what is specific to our community? Everyone is welcome to listen and to benefit, but of course, the topic in the lecture is specifically geared to a specific situation. Specifically geared to a specific situation. Like we mentioned in the book, there are millions, thousands of people of color around the world, quote unquote black people, African people, second largest continent. But that's not what the book is about. And the book clearly stated Negro Americans. And the plight and the situation of black people, African Americans, people of color in the United States is unique. It's not like people from West Africa or South Africa. It's not the same. It's very different. So this specific, yani, not your niche. Being entitled with regards to the topic, if you want to ask about it, or if someone wants to add something, inshallah ta'ala, we'll do that briefly before we make Salat al-Isha. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
One question, in passing the baton and all that stuff like that, all that good stuff, what would you say, well, let me start with this. One of the things that we were brought up on, especially in this Imam, was Salat in the Masjid, especially the Fajr Salat and the Isha Salat. What would you say is the importance of that in uh, looking for somebody to become a part of the administration in the masjid or what have you? Is that something that you would look at their participation in Salat, especially the Fajr and the Isha?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Like, questions regarding a person frequenting the masjid, coming to the congregational prayers, especially Fajr and Isha. Would you take this into consideration with regards to someone giving or receiving the baton, administrative duties, being a part of the community, the jama'ah, so on and so forth? I think that one of the best things to be mentioned here is the statement, is the athar of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that's been collected by Imam Muslim. And Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu, and we know that Sahih Muslim only has a few mawquf narrations, بخلاف Sahih Bukhari, الذي كثر فيه الموقوفات. Imam Muslim doesn't mention too many narrations of the companions, what they actually said themselves. His main focus is on what the Prophet ﷺ said. Very different than Imam al-Bukhari's book, which has a plethora and abundance of athar, of what the companions and those who came after them said. From those things that Abdullah bin Mas'ud said in his narration, he said, وَلَقَدْ رَأَيْتُنَا وَمَا يَتَخَلَّفُ عَنْهَا إِلَّا مُنَافِقٌ مَعْلُومُ النِّفَاقِ. He says, indeed, there was a time in which رَأَيْتُنَا, us, the companions, how things were, no one would stay away from the congregational prayer except he was a well-known hypocrite. Not a hidden hypocrite, maybe ma'loom nifaq. He was a blatant hypocrite. It was clear munafiq. If he chronically and systematically, without no excuse or legitimate reason, avoided the jama'ah. So that's considered to be the vertebrae of community life. The vertebrae, the congregational prayer. How do you know? Where's Sheikh Malik? He's sick, he's under the weather, so on and so forth. Well, who is Sheikh Malik? Why am I even asking about him? Except that I'm used to seeing him. I'm used to shaking his hand and having the oil smell on my hand. I'm used to giving him a hug. I'm used to him making a joke. I'm used to him being at the door. I'm used to him saying, do you need anything? But if he never ever comes to the masjid, only on Friday, only in Ramadan, Sheikh Malik is sick. Oh, who's that? Where? I don't know. The vertebrae of the community is the congregational prayer. That's when you see your brother. That's when you shake his hand. That's when you ask him how he's doing. That's when you make a joke. That's when he roasts you. That's when he invites you over his house. He tells you that he had a baby, that there's an aqiqah. So there's someone who's never in the masjid. They come once in a blue moon. Their Islam, I wouldn't feel comfortable with. Forget an administration. The heck with administration, the Jama'ah and the Baton. Their Islam, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with if I never ever see you in any congregational prayer. Something's wrong. And I'm not praising myself, saying that I've made it to some level of Islam. No, it's not the point. So the congregational prayer is the vertebrae of the Jama'ah. What can you do with a broken back? What do you say? What is symbolically used when you've defeated your enemy? Say, I've done what? Broken your back. You can't move. The game is what? It's over. There's no more quarters to put into the machine when the back of the enemy has been snapped. This is not the case, Sheikh. So that's very dangerous. And I'll end my answer by saying that beware of people, beware of seeking authority. That's dangerous. The Prophet ﷺ, he clearly says, Ya Abdurrahman ibn Samurah, la tas'al al-imara. Don't ask for leadership. Because if you ask for the leadership and you're given that leadership by you asking, وَكِلْتَ إِلَيْهَا, Allah won't help you in that leadership. But for those who want to be a part, they want to run, they want to do things, they want the baton to be given to them, I don't even see you in the masjid. How can I trust you with the house of Allah? And you're never in it. Think about that statement. How sick does that sound? How can I trust you with the house of Allah and you're never in the house of Allah? You're a stranger, you're a guest to the house of Allah. How does that work? So many brothers, and this is a problem, and many people that complain about the old heads in this masjid and other masjids, the old heads are stuck in their ways, they're stubborn, they're greedy, they don't want to give up anything, they don't want to be inclusive, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, maybe not. But where are the young brothers? Are they opening the masjid for Fajr? Like he said, are they paying the bills? Do they know how to pay the bills? Once I was in Canada, it was an older Somali brother. He said, and the topic of discussion was the same exact topic. He says, we have no problem giving you the center. We built it. We spent, we for the last 20, 30 years, we paid all the money. He says, but do you guys know how much the water bill is? Not the gas, not the electric, not a new carpet. Do you know how much the wudu costs monthly? And he says, who from among you youth will come out of his own pocket and pay the water bill when it's due because there's not enough money in the sadaqa box? Think about that now. People, they complain about it. I want to do it. I want to be involved. But they're not willing to be there to put in the work. And from that is, how can you be an administrator of a mosque? How can you run other people's lives and their spirituality and yours is severely lacking? And when I talk about a brother who lives far away, that's different. When I talk about someone who's sick, that's what? That's different. But we talk about someone who just doesn't come to the masjid. And even if you did live far away, because you drive to get food, you drive to go here, you drive to have recreation, you drive to have fun, but you don't come to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of the brothers that are closest to me are those that I see every Friday, that I talk to, because we see each other. So that's pivotal of the baton being passed and the baton being received. That's pivotal. The congregational prayer is pivotal. Pivotal. Allahu Akbar. Fadl Sheikh.
Hey, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Muhammad Abdul-War. I'm very much involved in passing the baton. I'm 72 now. I've been, since I was 30 years old, I've been working with youth. And my goal was always to transfer that. My question to both of you is how much of the disruption of that transfer is environmental in relationship to the society itself. The changes in developing the society, such as, let's say, 40 years ago, a cell phone where you could pop a button and pull up anything you want to take your nuts on a whole other mission at 12 years old is different in our time when we were 12 years old, right? Okay, so I think that how much of that I'm saying is in that transition, that change in time, like Reaganomics, the 80s, the things that were done, okay? The difference in children before the 80s up until, as we go, and it's getting worse, homosexuality, pornography, all those things. So many things going on in terms of that transfer. So the point I want to say, when you answer that question, I just want to drop this one little seed from my experience, and that is that early intervention is the key. The earlier, okay, you can get the young brother, the better. Fathers have sons, sisters have daughters. That's where passing the baton starts. As you just said, Brother David said, you bring your son to the masjid. All of us brought our sons to the masjid, right? All of us in the 60s, the 70s, we brought our sons right into the masjid, right? But what happened? What happened when they got mature enough? What happened when they got married? What happened when they got old enough to make that decision for themselves? You had to say, hey, did you come to the masjid? Why you haven't come to the masjid or whatever? So what I'm saying is that there is a transition there, all right? That my question is, how much to you, in your understanding of it, how much of a, difference does that make in terms of the difference in time? And then the issue of early intervention. Earlier, and then plus a system. A strong system of, like a sort of rites of passage system where they hold those values, right, through practice, right? Through practice, because a person learns from seeing you. You can say anything in the world, but as much as what you're doing, a child learns from what you do. So that consistency, that system, right? It could be rites of passage, it could be the length of time you stay with them, because of course I do Jawala Scouts, I see this. We had a situation, I have men in here now that was in my Jawala Scouts when I was a scout leader. Brother Rashad's here as well. These guys are grown, now they run the Jawala Scouts. They're leaders in the Jawala Scouts. So the baton has actually been passed. So again, Philly is unique in the sense that we've been successful in that area. Alhamdulillah. But again, could you help me with those questions?
I agree with everything that you said as far as early intervention. First, Bismillah. The thing is that the times that we live in, or the youth they live in, it does impact how they perceive things and what's important. I think, and that's just the way it is. Having programs that makes them have a need or feel a need to attach themselves to the masjid is needed. Whether it's Jawala Scouts or whether it's after school Islamic programs that, or even not just Islamic programs, but maybe programs that also help them with their secular schoolwork in the masjid or at the masjid as well, where they can ask for help from the Muslims for whatever they need of schoolwork, and then also the fact that they're doing it in the masjid is a benefit because they're here. They're not anywhere else. So that alone is a benefit. But then having programs, whether it is after school or in the weekend, summer programs, these things are needed. These things are needed. And then it comes back to the issue of sacrifice. Brothers need to, you need the brothers there to put in the time, the work. You need the brothers there that have the children that need this to be able to give their children to this type of things that's available.
I would add, the first part of the question is you got to be flexible and versatile and open-minded, resilient. And this is something that we learned from the Prophet's Sunnah. A perfect example of this is the Battle of Uhud. The mushriks were larger, they were physically stronger, had greater number, okay? Or even a better example, in the 4th year of the Hijrah, the Battle of Al-Ahzab, the Khandaq, the trench, in which you had the pagans from Mecca seeking revenge for Badr and Uhud. They were humiliated and defeated. And then you had the Munafiqs from Medina, and then you had the other people that came together, the Confederates, all to finally eliminate this man named Muhammad and his followers. So the Prophet ﷺ, he adopted a totally new strategy. A strategy that was unknown and unconventional to Arabia at that time, and that was trench warfare. And he got this from Salman, who was a Persian. Obviously Persia, a very long history, a world power, a great deal of culture and military technology. The Persians, the Romans, for years. They were way ahead of the Arabs in society and technology. And the Prophet didn't say, we're not fighting in the trench. That's That's ignoble. That isn't holy enough. We can't show our bravery. We have to fight on the battlefield. Rather, he adopted Salman's strategy, and it worked, as they say, quote unquote, like magic. And obviously, there was no fighting, no real fighting in that battle. Allah destroyed them with the wind. But the pagan Arabs who came to the outskirts of Medina and wanted to attack the Muslims, they were flabbergasted. They were bewildered. They said, "What is this? What's a trench? Why are they hiding in the trench? Why are they throwing things and launching things?" They didn't know what it was. So the Prophet ﷺ, he used the new strategy, and he did not remain rigid and stuck in his way. And that's a huge problem, is that the 80s are not the 70s. The 80s are not the 90s. The 90s, 2000, like you said, a person 12 years old can take, would you say, a whole mission from the comfort of their lap, their fingertips. They can be in a different world, and you don't even know it. Nothing like that existed in the 60s and 70s. You wanted to get alcohol, you had to go sneak and grab it. You wanted to get a Playboy magazine, you had to go. You had to go get it physically. You wanted to listen to something bad, you had to go get it physically. But now my 10-year-old, not 12-year-old, my 9-year-old is in his room at night with a passcode, face recognition, downloading, streaming, watching, communicating. You don't have a clue. Right at the dinner table. You're eating there, all right, scrolling. You come by, phone is clicked, locked. You don't know what's going on. So there's a difference. So with regards to that point, Sheikh, is that the leaders and the elders, they have to understand is that the Sunnah promotes flexibility. Not in the concrete principles that never ever change. It doesn't matter. The 50s, 30s, 60s, bravery is always bravery. Cowardice is always cowardice. Honesty is always honesty. Those things never change. But the forms, the appearances, those things change, and they will change, and they must change. Flexibility. The Prophet used a different strategy in the warfare, and look at the result. As far as the early intervention, many of the early predecessors, they would say, إِنَّمَا تَقْبَلُ الطِّينَ الْخَطْمَ وَهِيَ رَطْبَةٌ. Is anybody here working in construction? The brothers are here, do like, I tell you, anybody a stonemason here? I tell you, when you have the mortar or the cement, what do you do with it, Shaq? You come back an hour later, or I saw your hand up, huh? Construction. Dog. You got anybody here to deal with cement, things like this, sand and mortar? How do you put the brick wall up? Do you lay it down, then come back 2 days later and try to sit the brick atop of it, or you have to deal with it when it's what? Wet. Cement has to be wet. And not only does it have to be wet, but you have to be vigilant. Someone will write in the cement, right? Remember that back in the day, you would write your name when they do the cement, right? So the point is that early intervention is key. You can't mold something that's dry and hard. My son got an attitude problem now. He ain't gonna listen to me. It's too late. My son has his own desires now. He's not gonna just follow me. It's too late. But it doesn't mean that you give up and that you lose hope. And I would say that I learned many things from my father later on in life. And I didn't listen to him when I was younger. But 20, 30, had kids, then, that's what he was talking about. So the message will never be wasted, inshallah ta'ala. But early intervention is key. And they would say that the clay only accepts the potter's hands while the clay is wet. It has to be soft. So you have to get your son when your son is pure and innocent. When your son idolizes you and looks up to you, not after he's big and grown and strong, so on and so forth. So that I agree with it, like you said, like Sheikh Hanif said. And that's a long discussion with regards to the Sunnah, the Prophet's hadiths about what you mentioned. Flexibility, generations being different, and secondly is early intervention. There's so many hadiths in which the Prophet molded the companions when they were young, early on. Wallahu a'lam. Any other questions here from the brothers with regards to the topic? Fadl akhi.
My question is, I know growing up, like with the people that I was growing up with, I'm seeing now that, I don't know how to say this, like, without being too, like, explicit, but I'm seeing, like, tendencies of things that Allah, like, destroy cities for. And in the Jamaat, how do you go about dealing with those things with people that you grew up with?
Them doing the things that Allah destroys people for? Cities for.
I'm not touching this.
Allah destroying a city for, and now you have friends that do those acts. Clear. Well, of course you give them advice. Of course you try to figure out why they're doing those acts. Many people, they do acts not because they want to do the act, but because of other reasons, external reasons. Unfortunately, like leaving Islam. The average apostate from Islam, 9 out of 10 of them, you talk with them, is a personal reason why they left Islam. It's a personal traumatic experience why they left Islam. And then they try to justify it theologically. If the Quran doesn't make sense, I found Christ. That's not what you really believe. And that's not why you left Islam. You left Islam for other reasons, for race, for culture, so on and so forth. And there may be people, your friends, who do those acts because they're lacking attention, or they've been hurt, or they feel they've been let down, or abandoned, or forgotten about. So my advice to you is that when you give them advice, try to find their thumb screw. What made you start doing this? How did you get involved in this? You never know what they might tell you. They may need someone to talk to. They may need someone, a shoulder to cry on. They may need someone to give them some tough love. You never ever know. And this is all included in the Prophet's words, ad-dinu nasiha. Ad-dinu nasiha. Ad-dinu nasiha. Is listening to your brother, advising your brother, and also listening to your brother. One of the most important skills of any counselor or therapist is the ability to listen without judging. That's why people go and pay good money to those therapists. They sit on the couch and they talk and they don't judge and they listen to them. Then they give their advice, so on and so forth. Last but not least, is that if your friends keep doing those abominations, whatever they may be, and you've warned them and advised them, they are no longer your friends. You're not allowed to keep the connections with the people who openly, publicly oppose Allah and His Messenger in that manner. And Allah knows best. Khairin and Sheikh Malik. Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
I was just thinking, a lot of the talk was about the older brothers, younger brothers. It seemed like the attachment there would be community in terms of family. You know, it's like just somewhat to a family. The younger brothers probably attached to the, you know, their father, their uncles like that there. Today, in the society, especially here in Philadelphia, right, we have so many Muslims in the city of Philadelphia that haven't even stepped in the masjid. We got so many young people that claim to be Muslims. We got so many young people that claim to be Muslims and they're killing one another. We have janazas every day, right, with this. So my question is, I don't see any of the masjids, right, collectively or individually making a concerted effort to try to figure out a strategy to reach out to these, you might say new shahadas or whatever, but people that don't know their deen, and they're doing these things, and it's not even affecting them because they don't know their deen. You know, it doesn't bother them to kill another Muslim or be, you know what I mean, like that, because they never been in the masjid, they never understand community life, they never understand brotherhood, you know, but if you walk up to them, I'm a Muslim, they Muslims, you see what I'm saying? So I think that we need to address that point in terms of what strategy do we come up with in terms of reaching out to these people, or will we continue to let this evolve? You see, as it evolves, people, everybody know the statistics. You know what I mean? It's beyond, it's over proportions. It's like really out of control. I mean, every day, you know, somebody getting hurt, somebody getting shot, somebody getting killed. You know what I mean? There's no effort to reach out to you. Back in the day, you know, like we want to say it was a old head, but back in the day, when I threw Shahada, right, we went out on the corners, whether they was gangs or whatever, we brought him in, man, we went out on the corner, where the gangs at? We going out. Listen, come to the masjid. This is the dawah. You know what I mean? And we went out there and we brought them in. You know, but we don't see that effort. And maybe, like you said, it might be a different, that's the point I'm trying to get at. It might be a different strategy now. So I'm asking, what is the strategy now for that?
Clear.
A direct strategy or direct involvement for some people in a situation like that might not be the overall best strategy to take. Rather, me personally, I'm a firm believer in tarbiyah wa tasfiyah. We have to rectify ourselves as much as possible as a community. And doing so will have a trickle down effect. Okay, when you correct yourself and you then interact with that brother that's out there doing whatever he's doing, you're able to correct him. Um, that's my opinion on it, but let's see what the Sheikh got to say.
There was a lot that was mentioned in your question, Sensei. Many different points. In brief, we have to get back to some of those good old practices of street dawah, of engaging the community, engaging the social life outside of the walls of the masjid. Maybe some of us have forgotten about it. Maybe we've become tired and exhausted. Maybe we became complacent and relaxed and lost that hunger. And we feel that, we're establishing that's it. There lies no doubt that, obviously I grew up in this masjid. I was a Jawala scout, okay? There lies no doubt, it was a feel, let's say a vibe. The masjid, the Muslims, walking down the street, going to the store, the respect that Muslims got didn't exist. It was unthought of doing this to a Muslim. Muslims doing it to each other. So perhaps I think that some of the problem is maybe we have some dust on us, and we need to blow off that dust. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is a reality. The Prophet ﷺ tells us about dust. He says, إِنَّ الْإِيمَانَ لَيَخْلُقُ فِي جَوْفِ أَحَدِكُمْ كَمَّا يَخْلُقُ الثَّوْبَ الْخَلِقِ فَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ أَنْ يُجَدِّدَ لَكُمُ الْإِيمَانِ. That indeed, Iman can become worn out. Iman can become stale, quote unquote. Iman can become faded. فِي جَوْفِ أَحَدِكُمْ. In your hearts, just like a garment is faded after washing and wearing stains and the wear and tear of life. So ask Allah to renew your Iman. So maybe we have some dust on us and it's time to blow it off. Let's get back to what we were doing back in the day. Let's get back to the good values, as was mentioned, the good principles. We need to get back to that. Secondly, Sheikh Hanif mentioned about indirect, direct strategy. Things are different. Social media, things aren't the same. So I think it should be a combined effort, Sheikh. But the problem of murder and killing, we're all, I think most of us in this masjid have had a family member killed, a son, an uncle, a nephew, a father, a mother, shot in the streets of Philadelphia. Most of us, a son, somebody died from gun violence. And I think that one of the things that the brothers need to do is to explain to the youth that these people that you're listening to and watching on a television screen, they're not real people. Real gangsters don't look like that. They don't talk like that. No one gets on a record and talks about how many people they killed, how many drugs they sold, or how much illegal money. No one does that. Okay, these different actors and movie stars, they go home to mansions at the end of the day. They're not going home to a drug empire or drug capers. They're not. Al Pacino is not a gangster in real life. Robert De Niro is not the Godfather. He's not Don Corleone, Marlon Brando. They're not real people. And these people singing and glorifying murder and talking about killing, they're not real people. They're not real people. And it seems fun, it looks fun, and it's fun until those bullets rip through your flesh. Until you come home 40 years later. Or until you can't walk anymore. It's fun until the reality sets in. So we have to tell the people about the reality of death and of killing, and it's not a fun thing. And those who glorify war are those who have no experience of it, as a wise person once said. Those who glorify war are those who have no experience of it. You've never done anything like that. You don't know what it's like. It sounds good, it looks good. So we have to get this message across to our youth. And this is all included in the text of the Quran and Sunnah about the severity and the gravity of killing and of murder. وَمَنْ قَتَلَ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمْ. Allah talks about the severe punishment. Killing a believer. It doesn't matter. Money, drugs, respect, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And how would you feel when that's your nephew, your uncle shot down in the street? So this is something we have to raise the consciousness. We have to raise the awareness. Maybe we need to go on the streets and make this talk. How we take our communities back. How do we get rid of these people that are killing our youth and our youth that glorify killing? Last but not least, says Sheikh, with regards to the masjid and getting the youth in the masjid, then everybody's not going to come to the masjid, unfortunately. There are some people that are just going to be misguided. But it's our job to make our voice heard, and it should be loud. The masjid is a hospitable place. It's a public place. It doesn't matter how many legs you have, 2 or 1, how many arms you have, what skin complexion you have. The masjid is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're always welcome. And there is no clique or clan or group or Democrat or Republic. It's the house of Allah, and it's a public place. And we need to make that clear and clearer than what it already is, and invite them to the masjid. And as was mentioned, infrastructure and programs, youth nights, tournaments, which the brothers have been doing for years. But maybe it's time for us to recalibrate our strategy now, because it's 2020. And 2020 is very different than 2010. And 2010 is very different than 2000. 2000 is very different than the 90s. The 90s different than the 80s. So all of these things, I think, the brothers and the sisters, the last thing we'll say is they should collectively come together. Those who have knowledge, those who have experience, those who are young, those who are old, collectively work together, sit down, strategize, put together practical tactics of how to get rid of this problem, how to bring this back, and how to reestablish that, so on and so forth. And all of this is included in Allah Azza wa Jall's statement, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Okay, helping each other, calling out to each other, reaching out to each other. All right, that's the bottom line. And I think that we should make follow-up on this topic. And I think that we should write things down and put it into practice, inshallah. The words are clear. The advices are clear. What we need is the physical practice of establishing, reestablishing, continuing what's already been established, passing the baton and receiving the baton. May Allah Azza wa Jalla bless you all. May Allah Azza wa Jalla guide us all. And may Allah Azza wa Jalla keep us safe.
That young brother had his hand up right there.
This all. Do you have a question?
No, I was like took the words right out of my mouth, so I was about to speak on that.
Alhamdulillah. 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 Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.